All right. Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. If you can hear me well, go ahead and give me a thumbs up before I start chatting more. All right. Thank you so much. I know we'll probably have some more friends be joining us in the next couple minutes, but if you have done a webinar or met with me, you know that I can talk a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Hannah Peters. I am a registered dietitian, and today we're going to talk about dietary fats and learn what to keep, what to cut, and how to swap. I did send out a handout this morning, so if you're somebody that likes to take notes or um, go back and look at this information, feel free to go ahead and print that out and save it on your desktop. All right, it's here. One person can't hear. Everyone else can hear pretty well, though. Kimberly, maybe log out and log back in. Okay. All right. So overview of our time today, we're going to talk about the functions of fat, why we actually do need them, what different types of fats there are. So kind of titled them something fun, the good, the bad, the ugly, to help you guys remember that. And then share some simple swaps that we can make in our home and when we're eating like a fast food or in the restaurant as well. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you guys remember that like in the 90s, dietary fat was really attributed with weight gain, and so there was a lot of fear around fats, and I still think that that lingers today. And so let's talk about fat and why we do need some of it. Our bodies utilize it, but it is something we have to be conscious about because there's different types of fat. Some we want more of than others. And then one big thing is that fat does contribute to our energy needs, which is good, but it is higher in calories than our protein and carbs. So we don't want to eat it in excess like we may, like, one example I use oftentimes is like nuts. They're great fats, but we're not going to sit and eat a bag of nuts like you might eat a fruit or a bag of popcorn because they're more calorically dense. Um, so if you're trying to watch your total calories, trying to lose weight, and we want to be more mindful about the amount of fat we're using. It's also essential for hormone production. So they're the building blocks for estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and we know that these hormones influence our metabolism, energy, stress response, and reproductive health. Fats also provide essential fatty acids. So these are fats that our body can't make on its own. So we have to get it from our food. So omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, which are really important for heart health. They can help manage inflammation, control blood clotting, brain health, lots of good benefits, especially those omega-3 fats. Dietary fat is also required for the small intestine to be able to absorb our fat-soluble vitamins. So vitamins A, D, E, and K, and some phytonutrients. We need that fat so our bodies can actually absorb it and utilize it. Fats are important for our cell membranes. They help insulate our body and provide protection to vital organs as well. So all that to say, you can see that it's not something we want to 100% avoid, but we do need to be thoughtful about the ones we're choosing. So let's dive into that a little more. So we have the good here on the left. The good fats are going to be our unsaturated fats. So you may see monounsaturated or polyunsaturated. Those are included in the, umbrella unsaturated fats. Some examples of these would be like our olives, olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, canola oil. So these are the ones that lower your bad cholesterol, so the LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, and your overall risk of heart disease. So these are the ones we want to be eating more often and replacing our saturated and trans fats with these unsaturated fats. And then these also have essential fatty acids that our bodies need too, the ones that we can't make that we were just talking about. So there's omega-3s and omega-6s. All right, in the middle we have the bad fats. So these are the saturated fats. like meats, cheese, dairy. There is a plant source of saturated fat, so that's your tropical oils, um, like a coconut or palm oil. A lot of people don't realize that those are actually really high in saturated fat. And we'll see some examples here in a few slides as well, so you can kind of understand what I'm saying when we break it down. So the American Heart Association and dietary guidelines for Americans recommend that we limit our saturated fat consumption to reduce risk of heart disease. So the AHA recommends limiting saturated fat to less than 6 to 10% of your total daily calorie intake. So if you're on a 2,000 calorie diet, just as an example, this is going to be about 13 to 20-ish grams of saturated fat a day. Okay, so I want you to kind of like put that in the front of your head. So as we start looking at nutrition facts labels throughout the rest of the presentation, you kind of remember what we're trying to kind of limit to around what numbers. Okay, so these are going to, again, raise that bad cholesterol, increase risk of heart disease. So these we want to limit and try to replace when we can with unsaturated fat. And so then the last ones are the ugly. So these are the trans fats, and they're ugly because they're kind of a double whammy. They're going to raise that LDL, that bad cholesterol, and lower your HDL, the good cholesterol. And so these can be found in products with partially hydrogenated oils. There's trace amounts in dairy and meat as well. So these can be like cakes, cookies, crackers, pastries, pies. A lot of the processed foods. And then the combination of how they raise your LDL and lower your HDL really increases our risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes. And then I added this interesting fact that the World Health Organization estimates that trans fats contribute to more than 500,000 deaths each year in individuals who suffer from cardiovascular disease. So if you don't learn anything from today's conversation, I think it's important to know that we need to try to limit all these highly processed foods that may have some of these trans fats in them and try to eat more whole foods for our bodies and our heart health. All right, so understanding the nutrition facts label is really important when we're trying to make decisions about fats. So let's look at this a little more closely. Remember, we always want to look at the serving size and try to compare that to how much you're actually eating to get a real estimate of the grams of fat you're consuming. So at the top you see in this example, we have 8 servings per container, and the serving size is 2/3 of a cup. So, if you're eating a whole cup, you're going to have to adjust the nutrition facts to give you the right amount of fat. It's going to be more than 8 grams total, okay? So total fat is going to tell you the total grams of fat in the serving. And so this is going to include saturated fats, trans fats, and unsaturated fats. So you can see how there is an indentation, and those saturated fat and trans fats are not bolded underneath total fat. And that is telling you like, hey, these are included in the total fat, but we're breaking it down for you so you know, because we know those are the ones we really want to watch more. So again, saturated fat is going to tell you how much is in that serving, and trans fats as well. But there's a caveat with trans fats. The FDA allows products to claim 0 grams trans fats if they contain less than 0.5 grams per serving. So if there's 0.4 grams, they can just say 0, which I know is like 0.4, like it's not that big. But if we start to eat, multiple servings and we're getting, trace amounts from all these different things, that can add up. We do want to be mindful of it. So checking the ingredient list and looking for partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated oils can help you know if there might be a little bit of trans fats in that product as well. But again, trying to eat more of those whole foods will help reduce those trans fats. And then one of my favorite tips to share when we're trying to review the nutrition facts label, because it can be confusing, is to look at the percent daily value. So you can see that on the right here, all these percentages. And so it's going to tell you how much a nutrient in a single serving contributes to the total daily diet of 2,000 calories. So if we are trying to choose like a low saturated fat food, then we want that percentage to be 5% or less. We know that that's going to be a low amount of saturated fat. We're not having a ton. If it's 20% or more, then it's going to be high in that nutrient. So, like we just talked about, the different types of fat, saturated is something we want to be lower. Sodium is something you likely want to be lower. Fiber is something you want to be higher. So, just remembering that 5 and 20 can really help you gauge what's going on in this serving in this food. So 5% or less is low, 20% or more is high on that nutrient. Okay, so let's go through some simple swaps. So these are going to be some things that we could do in our home, some of our pantry staples we may be buying that we can swap out or in a recipe to change the fat content or improve it. So we have cream cheese or sour cream. You can replace that with a Greek yogurt or cottage cheese. So like think about dips and sauces. I mean, cottage cheese is going crazy right now. There's lots of ways that we can replace these in our foods. Mayo on sandwich, maybe instead of doing that, you add like an avocado or an hummus to give you some flavor, but lower in saturated fat as well. Butter, you can change to like an olive oil or use herbs and spices like lemon juice, garlic, fresh herbs to add some flavor without adding all the excess fat. And then when you're baking with butter or oil, you can replace that with like an applesauce, banana, pumpkin. You can get really creative here. So I have a 2-year-old and I make him a lot of different types of muffins, and oftentimes I'm using like applesauce or banana to kind of give it like a sweeter taste without the added sugars, but this can also be helpful for the butter or the oil too. So I've used pumpkin before in a baking mix as well. So Google is our friend. So if you're trying to figure out the ratios and all that, give it a Google and it can help you. Whole milk, you can change to 2% or skim milk. Heavy cream, lots of options here. It kind of just depends on how you're using it. So again, this is something to kind of look up later, depending on what you're doing. But we can change and do like a Greek yogurt, evaporated milk, silken tofu, cashew cream, half and half, cottage cheese, are some different options. And then instead of choosing our fattier meats, so these are going to be higher in saturated fats, we want to choose leaner meats. So lean, lower fat, so skinless poultry, fish. When we're looking at your red meats, words with loin in it are going to be leaner cuts. You can visibly cut the fat off that you see. There are lots of different types of lean meats, but trying to choose those over our fattier ones for less saturated fat. And then instead of just having meat in general, you could try plant-based proteins. So beans, quinoa, tofu, lentils, nuts, seeds, lots of different options here. And it could be like you're replacing a meal with these plant-based options or maybe doing half meat, half beans. Just depends on the recipe. Instead of a cream-based soup, you may swap for a broth base. Instead of frying, we can roast, bake, air fry, boil. So just changing your cooking method to improve the nutrition. All right, we're going to look at some of these pantry fats and just the difference in saturated and total fat. So on the left here, we have a tablespoon of butter, coconut oil, and olive oil. And so let's just look at how the fat changes. So the total fat, again, remember this includes saturated, trans, and unsaturated, is a little higher with the olive oil. So we have 12 grams in butter, 14 in coconut, 14 in olive. And then we look at the saturated fat, and so 7, 12, and 2 in the olive oil. So you can tell that there's a big difference between the three of these. And so remember, what did I tell you guys? Like if you're working on 6 to 10%, trying to keep it in that range of your total calories, How much saturated fat are we trying to limit to a day? Somebody send it in the chat. I can help y'all if I don't remember. 13 to 20, okay? And so if you only had a tablespoon of coconut oil, you're already at 12. If you have a tablespoon of butter, you're at 7. And we're trying to limit to 13 to 20. So just remember that, kind of eye-opening. And then we look at the right side here. This is 2 tablespoons of sour cream, mayo, and full-fat Greek yogurt. So total fat for sour cream is 5 grams, mayo 20 grams, and then full-fat Greek yogurt is 1.5 grams. And then we look at saturated fat. We have 3.5 grams in our sour cream, 3 grams in mayo, and then 1 gram in the full-fat Greek yogurt. So making these little swaps in your pantry staples can make a difference in your total saturated fat for the day and reduce that risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay, and you may be thinking like, what if I just switch some of my pantry staples to the fat-free versions? Like that will solve all these problems. But let's think about this for a minute. A few slides ago, we learned about all the functions of fat and how we do need some of it. And it also helps us feel full and satiated, helps slow the rise in our blood sugar. It can help with our cognitive function, can help with hormone production, vitamin absorption, the list kind of goes on. But whenever that fat is removed, sometimes they will add sodium or sugar to compensate for the flavor because fats give us that feeling of satisfaction a lot of times because of the sensory aspect to it, so the flavor or the texture. Think about some of how those fattier foods can make us feel. And so sometimes we have to watch out for the added sugar or the added sodium in these fat-free products. But also, if we don't have that satisfaction from it, sometimes research shows that people consume more when they notice like it is fat-free or reduced fat, like kind of a mental game here, because they forget that it still has calories. So just because it's fat-free doesn't mean it doesn't have calories or added sugar or whatever it is. So what do we do with this information? We could try to make more swaps, like we just talked about, switching from higher saturated fats and trans fats to more unsaturated fats. And then we also compare the nutrition facts label, like we did a few slides ago as well. So with the fat-free and reduced fat products. I'm not here to say that we shouldn't choose any fat-free or reduced fat products. I think there are some good ones out there, but I think we have to be intentional about looking at the nutrition facts label and see what's changed between the two. So making those swaps and then being sure to look at the labels as well. Okay, so when we're thinking about fast food, I'm not telling you that we need to be eating a lot of fast food, but I know we're going to do it occasionally, right? And so when you do, I want you to be thoughtful and prepared to make choices that are going to be better for your health. So let's first consider the size of our meals. If we choose like a kid size hamburger instead of an adult size, we can still enjoy some of those flavors with fewer calories and fat. And then when we think about sides, instead of going just for the fries, maybe we choose a side salad or fruit. That's going to reduce fat intake and add some nutrients to our meal as well, some fiber. We can swap our fried nuggets or chicken for a grilled nugget or breast. Instead of using like a cream-based salad dressing, we could try to find one that's more oil-based that might be a little lower in saturated fats. And then instead of getting like chips as a side, maybe you do like nuts or air pop popcorn, pretzels. And then for my coffee latte people, maybe instead of getting whole milk, and this is something to ask when you're getting a coffee or a latte, because oftentimes we just order it and we don't pay attention to like what they're using in the drink. And so instead of doing the whole milk, maybe you do like an almond or soy milk. All right, so let's look at a McDonald's comparison. On the left side, we're going to start with breakfast. So the sausage biscuit contains a total of 30 grams of fat, which is 38% of your daily value. Its saturated fat content is 13 grams, which is 66% of the daily value. Remember, 13 to 22, so we just hit it with the sausage biscuit, the lower end of that. And then no trans fats. And then we have the sausage and cheese McMuffin. So you're thinking, what if I just change to the English muffin? That does improve the fat and the saturated fat. So we're down to 26 grams and 10 grams of saturated fat. And there's a little bit of trans fats. And then what if we just take the cheese off and we just do the sausage and the English muffin? And so we're down to 22 grams of fat, total fat, and then 8 grams of saturated fat. So just by making that little swap, you're cutting, the sausage biscuit down from 13 to 8 grams of saturated fat and cutting 8 total grams of fat. So just think about this when we're ordering out. And then on the right side, we have our hamburgers. So again, like I know we're probably sometimes going to get a hamburger, but let's look at the difference between the Big Mac, the quarter pounder, and the cheeseburger. So the Big Mac, the total fat is 34 grams of fat, saturated 11, trans 1. And then we have the quarter pounder, which has 26 grams of fat. So it's lower in the total fat, but it has 1 gram higher in saturated fat. And then it has 1.5 grams of trans fat. So it's higher in trans fat as well. And then we have just like a regular cheeseburger. And so it only has 13 grams compared to the 34 in the Big Mac, and then 6 grams of saturated fat compared to 11 and 12 in the other two, and then less trans fats as well. So something to consider if you're craving a hamburger, if we're on the run, trying to just make the best decision that we can. And in order to do that, we really do need to educate ourselves and learn how to look at the nutrition facts label. So this is something you can look up online. This is how I did it. I just Googled McDonald's nutrition facts and pulled it up and reviewed it. So curious as to what you guys think about these fat contents, either this one or the pantry staples. Do they kind of change your perspective on ordering these items or using them in your recipes? You can add your thoughts in the chat. Very helpful, yes. Okay. Yeah, sorry if I ruined your plans for dinner too. Awesome. Okay. We're going to keep going. I told y'all I can chat. All right, restaurants. Instead of choosing the fried appetizers like the cheese fries, chicken wings, cheese sticks, let's do like a soup or salad, a broth-based soup, fresh salad, or if you're having a dip, maybe swap sour cream or queso for like a guacamole or a salsa. If you're ordering cheese pizza, you could choose half the cheese to kind of reduce some of that saturated fat. Sauces and dressings on the food, put them on the side so you can control how much is on your food. And then again with the fried meats, trying to choose more grilled or broiled. Fries or mac and cheese, instead of choosing those, maybe have like a baked potato, a fruit, side salad, steamed vegetables. Instead of doing just like a creamy Alfredo pasta sauce, you could ask them, you could just get marinara sauce, like the tomato sauce, or if you wanted still to have some of that creamy taste, maybe just ask them to add a little bit of the cream to the pasta sauce so that you're still having that flavor a little bit, but less of it. And then we talked about butter and olive oil and how we want to make that swap. I think also just asking the server, like, what kind of cooking oil do you use? Is it possible to use like an olive oil or canola oil when you're making mine versus using butter? Or can you hold the butter even? And then if you're wanting dessert, maybe cake or ice cream, maybe you try like a fresh fruit, or if you're going to have something, have like a smaller well, and of course, something that you could do with all of these foods too. So I know a lot of people will order their dinner and then only eat half of it and eat the other half later on. Okay, so chili, we got appetizers on the left side, and this was woo, mind-blowing. So we have our Texas cheese fries that have 119 grams of total fat, which is 153% of the daily value, 49 grams of saturated fat, which is 245% of the daily value. And then we have the jumbo soft pretzel, which is less total fat, 48 grams, 17 grams of saturated fat, and then sweet potato fries, 43 grams total, 7 grams saturated. So significant difference here between the cheese fries and the sweet potato fries. And then on the right side, we have a bacon ranch beef quesadilla, crispy chicken tacos, and the margarita shrimp bowl. They have a chicken bowl that was similar to this shrimp bowl as well. So the quesadilla has 125 grams of total fat, which is 160% of the daily value, and 42 grams of saturated fat, which is 210% of the daily value. The tacos are at 66 grams total fat, 21 grams of saturated fat, and then our margarita shrimp bowl has 27 grams total, which is 35% of the daily value, and 5 grams of saturated, which is 25% of the daily value. So much more reasonable. So again, just the importance of paying attention to what we're doing, and how, like, if you had just got the quesadilla, like you're over 100%. And then what if we had, what are we having for the appetizer? Just how all of that can really add up. And remember, I told you guys at the beginning too that fats are higher in calories than our carbs and proteins. So these are probably going to be pretty high calorie too when they're that high in fat. All right, so when you're eating out, make sure you choose restaurants with healthy options. Make sure you take a minute to review those nutrition facts before choosing a meal, and discuss those preferences with the waiter or waitress. And again, Googling the nutrition facts is really easy. A lot of times when you're ordering in an app, you can see them as well. So just be aware and be paying attention to those. And then, so the purpose of these two slides is that planning is important. So when you're eating out, we need to plan. When we're eating in, we need to plan. So eating in, make sure you review your schedule, because ideally you want to eat at home more often because we can control what we're putting in our foods. So review your schedule, see what's going on for the week, and choose recipes that fit your lifestyle. Like, this is so key. If you have soccer practice on Tuesday night, choose a crock pot recipe, or cook on Monday and eat leftovers on Tuesday. So reviewing your schedule, finding those recipes that fit it, then you make your grocery list, get to the grocery store and do the shopping, bring it in, cut things, prep it, have it in the refrigerator where you can see it, and then it's going to make your week way easier. You're going to be more likely to eat more nutritious foods. All right, so let's put all this together and a few reminders. First, read the nutrition facts label when you're grocery shopping, when you're eating out. This is crucial in understanding what we're putting in our bodies and making those informed choices. And then don't forget that the 5% daily value or less is low, and 20% or more is high. And so we want that saturated fat especially to be 5% or less, trans fat to be 0, no partially hydrogenated oils on the ingredient list. Next, we want to prioritize those unsaturated fats in our diet. They're going to be found in avocados, olives, nuts, seeds, avocado oil, olive oil, canola oil. These are going to be beneficial for our heart health and overall health. And then lastly, think about making some simple swaps to reduce saturated fats or trans fats in your diet. So instead of, you could use olive oil instead of butter, or choose nuts over chips. These small changes can make a big difference. And then lastly, make sure you're planning your meals. By planning, you're going to gain more control over the ingredients you're using and the types of fat you consume. So make sure you're doing this whether we're eating out or eating in, just being efficient and smart about the choices we're making. So I have one question for y'all. Share one practical takeaway or something that surprised you in the chat. And then if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot those as well. Hopefully, this was very informational and kind of eye-opening. I think those comparisons, even to me, I was like, whoa, like when you put them up there right next to each other, it is really eye-opening to see. Kind of scary too. All right. If anybody wants to share any questions or any thoughts in the chat, would love to hear those. Very helpful. I'm going to add in my feedback survey too for you guys in just a second. Canola oil is an unsaturated fat, so that was a question. Is it good? Yeah, so that's considered per the American Heart Association one of the better oils because it is lower in the it doesn't have saturated fats, unsaturated, so it's going to be better for your heart health, and research has shown that. Pay more attention to the amount of fats and daily percentages. Great to see how simple swaps can make a big difference. Learning to limit fast food. Yeah, that's a hard one, but it's so important for our bodies. I don't have the slide deck, but the handout basic has most everything in there for you guys to look at. How close to hitting the daily value of a saturated fat it is when you're just eating the sausage biscuit. Yeah, and a lot of people eat that sausage biscuit, so it is surprising when you actually look at it. I suddenly don't want McDonald's or Chili's. Oh, good information. Surprised how much cheese adds to the fats. I thought cheese and crackers was a better snack choice. And yeah, it definitely can be, but it can. Cheese is considered, it does have some protein and does have fat in it. So we just have to be mindful, and some will have more than others. Yeah, percent daily value, how much of it's consumed in fast food, and how much that can add up throughout the week. All right, I'm adding my link to the feedback survey. If you have a minute, go ahead and fill that out when you get a chance. Yeah, and that's so Patrick asked about the seed oils being demonized today, and so going back to the comment about the canola oil too, so our unsaturated fats and those oils are going to be better for us than choosing saturated fats. Look at the American Heart Association if you want like a reference for that, because research has shown when we make these swaps from saturated to unsaturated, it's going to be better for our heart health and overall health. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I will be sending out the recording shortly, and then take a minute to fill out that feedback survey, and have a great weekend.